Hey fellow Tamers and DigiDestined, it's Mike AKA Synaku from Overground, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over another deck profile for the 1.5 format. I wanted to kind of get my feet wet and get as many crazy cool deck ideas out there as much as I can before we reach the end of the format, just because I haven't been as active as I usually am over the last couple of months. And I can already kind of hear what you're about to say. This deck is very expensive. If you don't have all the cards to build it right now, do not fret. Don't bend over backwards trying to find all these cards. This is just something I want to share with the community, something that I've built that I'm having a lot of fun with and a lot of success with. And this is my black CresGarurumon Diaboromon aggro deck. I set out to build a black deck. I've been kind of experimenting with black on and off all format, and I've never settled on a list that I was super happy with. Most black lists you see nowadays focus on Craniumon, very blocker centric, very reboot centric, focusing on getting quick shots of damage in while constantly rebooting your blockers and kind of staving up a wall to defend yourself against all your opponent's oncoming threats. And I found that black as a whole, while strong, didn't have a lot of removal and kind of played a very simple game. It was just one giant turtle strategy with a couple opportunities to get quick damage in when you combine like this Greymon and this middle Greymon here. And I wanted to take these two cards specifically and kind of fold them into a new generation of black strategies that can make this deck as aggressive as possible. And enter the promo Diaboromon. Now, this card is not easy to find, and I've been bending myself over backwards getting a couple copies up to this point just by grinding out as many online events that I can and winning various tournament packs or participating to get various tournament packs as well. So thankfully I've been able to acquire 3 copies. I do have a 4th somewhere else with a friend of mine that I haven't been able to get a hold of, but I think I would play 4 if I had the opportunity, but in the meantime we're going to run with 3 for now. And what this promo Diaboromon does, we'll just move Ty's head out of the way if you're unfamiliar. For each Diaboromon that you have in play, this Digimon gets security attack +1. Now, the 1.0 Diaboromon, if you're unfamiliar, every time it attacks, it generates a token of itself, which is another copy, which his name is also treated as Diaboromon. So ideally, what this is meant to do is meant to swing for like a giant security attack +2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how many quote-unquote Diaboromons you have in play. In this instance, instead, I wanted to build up a deck that can give this Diaboromon reboot, combo it with this middle Greymon and this Greymon so it has jamming, and it's going to be attacking for security attack +2 every time. If we can build up to a second Diaboromon stack, or just have another copy of Diaboromon in play, period, the amount of damage that this Diaboromon with this perfect stack can create actually increases and gets stronger and stronger. And the idea is that I kind of took inspiration from the Ragnalordmon black decks, and I wanted to see if there was a way to create a black deck that was as aggressive as Ragna, that didn't necessarily need to play the extra kind of Ragna baggage pieces like the Bryweldermon and the Durandamon and the Ragna itself. And this is kind of what I ended up settling on after a few weeks of testing. And I'm very happy with the results, and I'm very excited to share the deck profile with you guys. Now, the secondary Digimon that we're pairing with our Diaboromon is CresGarurumon. And CresGarurumon allows us to look at the top card of our deck for every Digimon that our opponent has in play, when we Digivolve into him, of course, and we get to play a red or black level 5 or lower that we find among that pile immediately for free, no questions asked. And the reason that we're playing CresGarurumon at 4 specifically is to complement the fact that we want to see this Greymon and this middle Greymon as soon as possible. And what this CresGarurumon does, it allows us to dig through our deck to just put them into play immediately without necessarily having to A, rely on drawing them, and B, rely on having to evolve into them on top of something else. So this puts a body immediately in play for us to set up our perfect stacks for Diaboromon, or to set up perfect stacks for CresGarurumon himself, or any other Digimon that we're planning to build up and kind of prepare for battle, in a manner of speaking. So, and this engine is very powerful in black because this color lacks a lot of draw power. So what it lacks in draw power, it kind of makes up for in the sense that you can circumvent the need to have to draw into specific pieces by just kind of getting them into play and cheating them into play instead. And I thought that that mechanic was very strong, and it was kind of too strong to ignore. So that's why we're playing CresGarurumon as kind of our main mega, and Diaboromon is mostly our main attacker, so to speak. And the rest of the deck is just kind of built to kind of complement that specific engine and that complete that end goal at the end of the day. We just want to get to Diaboromon as quickly as possible, get in as many quick hits with Diaboromon as often as possible, make sure our Diaboromon survives with a plethora of blockers and DP buffs to make it stronger on the opponent's turn, and then that way we can close out the game in maybe 2 to 3 turns max. So let's go through the card by card. Now, I've talked pretty much a lot of the bottom end at length, and a lot of these cards we've discussed in other black deck profiles, so I'm not going to be spending too much time on them, but we're just going to talk about the card by card and how each card selection kind of complements this end strategy as a whole. So for our babies, we've got 4 Kapurimon and 1 Kakenmon. This is pretty much par for the course standard black babies at this point. You've seen them a million times before. I'm not going to really go into detail about them. Toy Agumon, pretty much the best rookie in black altogether. It gives whatever Digivolves on top of it reboot, and that unlocks all our powerful effects later on. 4 copies of Gotsumon. It's just a rookie blocker that we can get a blocker into play very quickly. It's also a good target for CresGarurumon. 3 Caramon, and this is a little bit of a new addition for black in general, and this is for 2 reasons. First of all, it lets our blockers on our opponent's turn be a little bit stronger and combos further with our ties here, because 1 Caramon and 1 tie means that all of our black Digimon in play get an additional 1000 DP, and if we get 2 ties in play with a Caramon, that's an extra 3000 DP. And this Diaboromon here, it actually is treated as a black Digimon and not a white Digimon compared to the 1.0 Diaboromon. So we can actually take advantage of these tie effects, and they can actually combo up with the Caramon. And the reason we play the Caramon is so that way, on our opponent's turn, we can make our Diaboromon 12,000, and ideally with another tie in play, that's 13,000, and that does 2 things. The first is that any 12,000 Digimon that's just base level, like, you know, a Phoenixmon or a Bryweldermon or a Durandamon or anything like that, won't be able to attack over it. That means they would be forced to crash, or in the case of if it's 13k, they wouldn't be able to even touch it. Furthermore, it makes it so that if we're going up against a Shine Greymon deck, they need to actually have an additional Tamer in play to take out the Diaboromon. So at 11,000, that means that 3 Tamers normally would take it out, because 3 times 4 is 12,000, but if we can get it up to 13, that means they actually need 1 extra Tamer in play, and it forces the opponent to have 4 Tamers to deal with this Diaboromon instead. So it's just a little cheeky way to kind of keep our Diaboromon alive to ensure that we get another very impactful, powerful swing on the next turn. Finally, we're rounding out our rookie lineup with 3 Commandramon. This is just a small vanilla count because we don't need to play as many 2-cost drops, because we are playing copies of Numamon as well, which for all intents and purposes is more or less a rookie due to its on-play cost of 3. So we can round out our rookie lineup there. We just have a couple cheap Digimon to help us choke out our opponent, or to get kind of quick evolution chains in play as quickly as possible if it comes up. Then moving on to our champion lineup, playing the 4 copies of Greymon. This is the one that if you have reboot, you also get jamming. 3 copies of Gardramon to give us an additional blocker in the champion spot. 3 copies of Tankmon and 2 copies of Numamon. So this is to help us turbo into our Diaboromon and CresGarurumon lines a little bit faster. Numamon helps us to get a champion in play very quickly that we can start evolving up as a 3 on-play cost, and Tankmon helps us play around things like Alter S at a 6,000 DP threshold. So that means if we evolve over the Tankmon for a 1-cost evolution and we get de-digivolved with something like Alter S, it will still survive, whereas the Numamon will still be destroyed. So we're playing a 3-2 split of that. Both have their pros and cons, but I feel like this is the appropriate number for how this deck is meant to be played right now. Moving on to the ultimate lineup, we're playing 4 copies of the Middle Greymon. Again, this is with, he has reboot natively, and his inheritable is that if the Digimon that evolves on top of him has reboot, it also gains security attack +1. 4 copies of Andromon. Again, we want a blocker at pretty much every single level, so that way we can hit a target off CresGarurumon that'll give us a blocker to help us stay alive longer in the game. It also helps us protect our Diaboromons longer as well. And then if those blockers manage to survive, it's an extra body that we can just evolve over top of to continue reaching our main win condition. And then finally for our ultimates, we're playing 1 lone copy of Inframon. This is just because it's another target we can get off CresGarurumon that gives us a kind of form of soft removal in a sense, because it helps us de-digivolve one of our opponent's Digimon by 1, and that can help us set them back by about a turn and force them to have the same mega or same whatever level they're missing to evolve over top of in order to keep continuing their lines of play. So we've discussed CresGarurumon, we've discussed the Diaboromon. Now we're going to move on to the level 7s. We're playing 2 Millenniumon and 1 Alter S. This can be kind of mixed and matched depending on what your local metagame is. If you're seeing a lot of Wrecking Rush, for example, I'd recommend going into more Alter S's, but for the time being right now, I think Millenniumon's very powerful, especially if you're going up against things like Megazoo or other Ragnalordmon decks, which is something that I'm seeing a lot of, and this helps me just kind of snipe that one individual tall stack, kind of get it out of the way. I don't have to worry about it anymore, and everything's fine and dandy. Next, we're playing 3 copies of Breath of the Gods, and this, again, comes in the full circle discussion of the fact that black doesn't have a lot of removal, so it needs more ways to kind of stay alive and stay in the game. And when Breath of the Gods is checked on the security, it makes it so that your opponent just cannot attack your security, period, for the rest of the turn, and that's a very powerful catch-all, like negate attack type skill, and I think that is very strong in security, but it's also very strong in the hand because it lets one of your Digimon gain reboot, and it makes it so that they can't be returned to the hand, have their DP reduced, or be returned to the deck. So this counters opposing Millenniumons. This opposes things like Cocytus Breath. This opposes even things like Shine Greymon itself. And the reason we're playing Breath of the Gods is because we can't always get Diaboromon to get reboot with something like Toyagumon, for example. So if we do like a CresGarurumon and we go into Metal Greymon, and then we can evolve into Diaboromon, this Diaboromon won't have reboot, so we won't be able to trigger this Metal Greymon effect. However, with Breath of the Gods, we can play it under Diaboromon, it'll get reboot just by its own effect, and then all of a sudden we'll unlock the Metal Greymon effect as well. And then finally, we're going to finish off the deck with just 2 copies of Tai. This is the memory setter, puts us to 3 every turn, and then has that benefit of all black Digimon on our opponent's turn will gain plus 1,000. So yeah, that is the deck. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, or even questions even, leave them in the comment section below, and I will get to them as soon as I can. If you think that you would have built this deck a little bit differently, if you think that there's something I might have missed, if you think there might be a specific card in the overall card pool of the game right now that would be a benefit to this deck, please let me know. And if you like what we do here at Overground, please consider subscribing, and if you like the video as well, please hit that thumbs up button so that way we know what content is going to be great for you, our fans. So thanks a lot for watching. I have been Mike AKA Synaku from Overground once again, and telling you guys to have a good one. We'll see you next time.